Hi there and welcome to the inaugural History Snaps video. I'm going to use this channel to produce short introductory videos on various historical topics with reading suggestions in the description for those who want more detail. So please stick around and I hope you enjoy. This video will give you a short history of the modern state of Iraq. I apologise in advance for mispronouncing any Arab or Kurdish names. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do it. In 1914, what is now Iraq was split between three distinct provinces of the Ottoman Empire: Basra, Baghdad and Mosul. The Ottoman Empire entered World War I on the side of the Central Powers in October 1914. It was to be its last war. Long before the war was won, the Allied powers began planning the carving up of Ottoman possessions. In 1916, Britain and France, with the assent of Russia, agreed a secret plan to divide the Middle East known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which placed most of Iraq under direct or indirect British control. It also clashed with the promises the British had made to their Hashemite Arab allies, which I'll come back to later. After the war, Britain received a mandate from the newly created League of Nations, a precursor to today's United Nations, to rule Iraq. This now included Mosul, as the British had realised the province contained a shit ton of oil. However, the British found Iraq hard to control. A Kurdish revolt broke out in 1919, followed in 1920 by a more generalised Arab revolt involving both Shia and Sunni religious communities. The revolt was suppressed, but at a cost. As a result, the British decided against formal control over Iraq. So they turned to Faisal of the Hashemite family, son of the man who had led the 1916 Arab revolt against Ottoman rule and friend of the legendary Lawrence of Arabia. To secure the Hashemite support, the British had promised to give them an independent Arab state, a vow which was largely ignored after World War I. Faisal had himself crowned King of Syria, but was swiftly thrown out by French troops. So the British brought Faisal to Iraq and had him crowned as the country's king. Britain's relationship with the new Iraqi kingdom was formalised by the 1922 Anglo-Iraqi Treaty, which handed power over most internal matters to an Iraqi government, whilst leaving Britain in control of Iraq's foreign and defence policies. The new Kingdom of Iraq was divided along religious and ethnic lines, and there was very little popular attachment to the state. As King Faisal himself put it, "In Iraq there is still no Iraqi people, but unimaginable masses of human beings devoid of any patriotic ideal." In 1924, an Iraqi Constitution was introduced, which created the framework for the country's politics. It gave Iraq a monarchy, government, two-tier parliament and judiciary. In practice, however, both parliament and the judiciary tended to fall under government control, and the key factor in interwar Iraqi politics was the relationship between the government, which until 1943 the monarch could only appoint and not dismiss, and the king. Political parties were not that ideological and tended to be the vehicles of ambitious politicians. The greatest of these was Nuri al-Said, leader of the Iraqi Covenant of Nuri al-Said party, who was to hold a total of 47 cabinet posts. It's worth noting that during this time the Iraqi state was tiny, employing only around 6,000 people in 1935, whilst Iraqi governments were drawn predominantly from the minority Sunni community. In 1930, Britain transferred additional powers to Iraq, paving the way for the country to join the League of Nations as an independent state in 1932. However, with the British at arm's length, the Iraqi Army began to play an increasingly assertive role in Iraqi politics, a position it would maintain until the fall of Saddam Hussein. In 1966, General Bakr Sadiq, who had previously suppressed Assyrian Christian and tribal revolts, removed the government and replaced it with another. This in turn was overthrown by a different army faction a year later. In the early 1940s, a defining issue in Iraqi politics was whether to side with Britain or Germany in World War II. Nuri al-Said supported the former, whilst Rashid Ali and a group of army officers known as the Golden Square backed the latter. Initially, Rashid Ali was successful, prompting Britain to invade and occupy Iraq in 1941. After the British left, Iraqi governments were stable until 1958, when, partly inspired by the 1952 Egyptian Revolution, both the government and monarchy were overthrown by a military coup led by Brigadier Qassam, ending the period of monarchy. Both King Faisal II and Nuri al-Said were murdered, with the latter's body being subject to gruesome mutilation but decided not to show for reasons of taste. Qassim's new policy was a programme of socialist-style land reform, with large amounts of land being seized by the state from the old notable landowning families and used to establish collective farms. Economically, this was a disaster, and Iraq went from a food exporting country in 1958 to a food importing one in 1982. In 1963, Qasim was himself overthrown and killed by a coalition of Arab nationalists, including the Ba'ath Party, who aimed to unite the Arabs into one socialist-style state. However, Iraq's new leader, President Arif, swiftly turned on the Ba'ath and removed them from power. In return, in 1968, following the Arabs' humiliating defeat in the 1967 War with Israel, the Ba'ath seized power for themselves. Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr became president and was greatly assisted by a younger Ba'ath Party member, Saddam Hussein. When al-Bakr stepped down in 1979 due to ill health, Saddam took over as president. Under the Ba'ath, the size of the Iraqi state was dramatically increased, from around 31% of GDP in 1968 to 80% in 1977. However, the economic impact of this was mixed. More generally, once they had power, the Iraqi Ba'ath quickly lost interest in the creation of a pan-Arab state and pursued an Iraq-first policy. The Iraqi Ba'ath were also heavily Sunni dominated, despite the Shia constituting a majority of Iraq's population. In 1979, Islamic fundamentalists, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, seized control of Iran. Fearing that they could incite the Shia of southern Iraq to rebel, and believing the revolution to have weakened Iran, Saddam ordered the invasion of Iran in 1980. The resulting war ended in a stalemate in 1988, before which it cost each side over 1 million lives. The war also left Iraq with a massive debt, which Saddam believed Iraq's Arab neighbours should help to pay. When they refused, he invaded Iraq's oil-rich neighbour Kuwait in August 1990, prompting the creation of an American-led international coalition which forced the Iraqis out during the Gulf War. Iraq's defeat during the Gulf War greatly weakened Saddam, and in 1991 rebellions broke out amongst the Shia in southern Iraq and the Kurds in the north. The former was ruthlessly suppressed, whilst the latter ended with the Kurdish zone of northern Iraq achieving a semi-independent status. Iraq was also subject to a strict sanctions regime which caused significant economic suffering, and was only partially alleviated by the UN's Oil for Food programme, which allowed Iraq to trade oil for certain humanitarian supplies. Western policy towards Iraq remained stable, except for a brief period of American and British airstrikes in 1998, until after the 9/11 attacks in New York and Washington. After this event, the Bush administration, convinced that Iraq still held chemical or biological weapons, and believing the regime had some links to jihadi terrorists, decided to carry out a regime change, also motivated by the neoconservative belief that liberal democracy could be introduced in Iraq by force. The Americans and their allies, including Iraq's old imperial masters the British, swiftly deposed Saddam when they invaded in March 2003. Saddam was captured at the end of the year and would later be executed. Once in control, the Americans made a number of key decisions. Firstly, they disbanded the Iraqi Army, releasing thousands of trained soldiers onto the streets, and they launched an aggressive program of de-Ba'athification, removing Ba'ath Party members from state employment. Both these measures disproportionately hit the Sunni population and contributed to an insurgency which incorporated Sunni interests and Islamic fundamentalist groups. In 2004, the Americans were for several months forced out of Fallujah by Sunni insurgents, while simultaneously confronting an uprising in southern Iraq from the Shia Islamist group the Mahdi Army, which saw fighting around the Imam Ali Shrine in Najaf, the holiest site specific to Shia Islam. Iraq's first parliamentary elections took place in January 2005 and were a triumph for a coalition of Shia Islamist parties known as the National Iraq Alliance, resulting in Ibrahim al-Jafri becoming Prime Minister. Over time, the insurgency became increasingly sectarian, with Sunni groups like al-Qaeda in Iraq, the group formed by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, which was a direct forebear of today's so-called Islamic State, launching indiscriminate attacks on Shia civilians. Shia death squads, often operating from within the police force, struck back murdering and torturing Sunnis. When the dome of the Al-Askari Mosque in Samarra, a site holy to Shia Islam, was bombed in February 2006, the violence came close to a full-on civil war. In 2007, President Bush sent more than 20,000 additional American troops to Iraq in a strategy known as the Surge, and this coincided with an uprising against the increasing al-Qaeda-dominated insurgents by tribes in the Sunni Anbar province, many of which had previously backed the insurgency. Anti-insurgent Sunni militias called the Sons of Iraq were developed, and together with the American surge managed to significantly reduce the level of violence. As a result, American troops handed over security duties to Iraqi forces in 2009, and US combat troops finally withdrew in 2011. However, Shia-Sunni tensions soon re-emerged, fuelled by the civil war in neighbouring Syria and the Sunni belief that they were being discriminated against by the Shia government of Nouri al-Maliki. The Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, the group formerly known as Al-Qaeda in Iraq, began making gains taking Fallujah in January 2014. In June of the same year, a 30,000-strong Iraqi army defending Mosul, the country's third biggest city, collapsed before an ISIS attack, and Shia militias had to be brought in to stop the group marching on Baghdad. Soon after, ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi declared a global Islamic State from a Mosul mosque. Over time, the Islamic State was pushed back, and in July 2017 the Iraqi Army, with the support of Western air power, finally succeeded in recapturing Mosul, though much of Anbar province remains under ISIS control. I hope you found this video interesting, and if so, please do like and subscribe. Also, please say in the comment section if you'd like any similar videos about other Middle Eastern countries. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.